All right, cool.
All right. Well, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Pepper, and I am a grandmother, and I'm a mom, and I have a story to tell, and I am hoping that if I can save one person the hell I've been through, I'll blab all day. And I'm nervous because I don't do cameras and stuff, but you're being a sweetheart and you're making this very easy for me. Thank you.
No
So,
worries.
my kids and myself, we've suffered horribly, and I would like to, if somebody else can see this and get a grip when their kids are young or before they're born, and they don't hurt their kids like I hurt mine, I would be really happy. Just one person. So,
Well, I have somewhat of an idea of what's going on, but why don't you tell the viewers?
well, before I get into that, there's two things I really want to say. First of all, I got to thank you personally. That's why I reached out to you personally. I've been doing carnivore for 7 months now, and I'm getting better, and in ways that the doctors never thought I could. This doesn't happen to people with my disease. I have scleroderma, and the changes in my body, the improvements, the healing, they don't happen. Once the skin thickening happens and you get uncanny valley and your face is turning into the mask, it can stay the same. You can stabilize for a while, or you just get worse. And the vascular damage, watching that be undone, that is pretty cool, and that's not supposed to happen. My rheumatologist is pretty thrilled. But as I am getting better, I still have a long ways to go. I'm not there yet. But the tragedy of my children's suffering and my son's ultimate death, that it was caused directly by the foods I fed them. And I started really internalizing this pain, and the guilt, you have no idea. And I was pretty much incapacitated. I just started crying and just crying. Every day I felt better. Physically, my soul was just crushed more. And at the same time, I was trying to find more information. I kept getting your videos, and I'd sub. And you got to admit, you can be a little acerbic sometimes. And it was a bit hard for me to handle. So I'd unsub. And then another video would pop up with another intriguing topic, and I'd be back, and then I'd sub. And I kind of did this dance away. And then one day, you and Daphne from Daphne Reloaded, the two of you were the ones that I was just doing this like a moth drawn into the flame, and then I get burned and I flew away. And then one day I was watching one of your videos, and all of a sudden it just sank in. I'm mad at the wrong person. I didn't do this. I did what I was told to. Other people, they did something even worse than poisoning my children. They handed me the spoonful of poison and convinced me to give my kids this poison, and then told me what a good mom I was for doing it.
What did they tell you to do, and who is they?
Oh man, the story goes back, with my kids from they were little bitty, and an army of doctors, specialists, nutritionists, dietitians. We were under very close medical care and lab tests constantly, and this was a effort to try to figure out what was wrong with everybody and get us back to some semblance of health.
So just to back up a little bit, there was some kind of medical condition with your son, and you were looking into a dietary intervention?
Yeah, oh man. Well, okay. So first of all, oh boy, I'm going to try to keep this as condensed as possible. This is a story. Okay. So I have to say, my mom didn't know anything about nutrition when she raised me, and she made a lot of mistakes. And when I was a teenager, I had to start unraveling this for myself. And it was a lot of macaroni and cheese, Pringles, hot dogs, nutrition. A balanced diet meant, I don't know, some macaroni and cheese, some hot dogs, and a can of green beans thrown in the pot for good measure. That was a balanced diet. And she was a good mom in the sense that she did the Crisco and the Wesson oil and the margarine instead of butter, because this was back during saturated fat is going to kill you.
Right.
So when I was 15, I was 185 pounds. I was not even 5 foot tall. I was miserable, being bullied, and my mom had no clue how to help me. So I started stealing, shoplifting Shape magazine and Muscle and Fitness from the local gas station. And I would go home and I would just scour all the diet plans and everything else, trying to figure out what to do. And did my best to alter this, with what I had available. And started hitting the gym that summer. And I lost 50 pounds in 3 months. Over the next 2 years of bodybuilding, I got in the best shape of my life. And I got really into nutrition, really, really into nutrition. And by the time I got married, and I was 21 when I had my daughter, and boy, now I'm pregnant. So I'm reading all the expectant books, and I'm going to do it right. I'm going to be a good mom. So I started, I was weighing everything, measuring everything, minimum, going for about 7 cups of produce a day. Everything was calculated to a nth of a degree. And took my prenatals, and they made me sick as a dog. And my daughter was born with some problems. She had foot deformities that we didn't figure out until years later. She was an allergy baby. She had, oh geez, what else? She was really well behaved. She seemed pretty content as an infant. I breastfed her really successfully. I had my son a year and a half later, and that did not go so well. And that pregnancy just drained me completely. And at this point, I was teaching nutrition classes. It was a volunteer position, but I taught wives and mothers how to best feed and care for their babies, and themselves and their families. And it was low fat, very, very, very low fat. Saturated fat, no. One thing, I got to do a really quick aside. One thing that makes me frustrated when I tell this story, people listen to what I fed my family and they say, oh, well, no wonder your family was sick. You gave them trans fats and you did all this, that, and the other. And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. I followed the best science of the day. I was all over this like a ham sandwich. And whole wheat bread and whole grain cereals and no artificial sweeteners and no sugars and everything homemade with love. And
you follow the food pyramid, basically.
Oh yes, I was extremely strict. And with a little bit of treats, a birthday or whatever, I'd let them have their piece of cake because that was actually part of the advice. Balance. There's nothing wrong.
And what kinds of meat?
Okay, so I didn't have a problem with any kind of meat until a doctor told me, I think my son was 3 or so, 2 or 3, and my daughter was a year and a half older. So they were like 3 and 4. And the doctor told me, don't feed the kids red meat. You guys don't even have it in the house. You don't need red meat. So I took red meat out of our diet. We were eating a lot of poultry. And here's the other thing. Back in those days, the premium, nowadays it's grass finished beef and all that stuff. Back in those days, it was corn fed everything. So I'm buying these yellow chickens and lots of tuna fish. My son wasn't doing well, and we had already gone through a health crisis with him, which is another story. And so I was pretty on alert. I took him in and I was like, his color is not good and he's not thriving and he doesn't have any energy. He just wants to sleep all day, and he's, I guess, almost 3. And the doctor looked at him and examined him, and he kind of looked troubled, and he walked over to my daughter and he examined her. And then he got kind of mad and he walked over and he said, let me see your eyes. He said, what are you feeding your family? He said, do you give your kids red meat? I said, oh God, no, I don't feed, He said, what do you eat? And I told him lots of poultry, some fish, and he blew up. He was going to call the police right there.
What?
Fat diet. And I'm like, whoa, another doctor in this clinic told me to. And he said the words bullshit to my face. He said, I'm going to get your children taken from you. Parents like you shouldn't have kids. And I'm trying to remember the other doctor's name. And finally, I remembered his name. It was Dr. So-and-so. And he was like, oh, we'll see. He stormed out, came in a few minutes later, dragging this other poor doctor by the sleeve. And he's like, this woman is saying you told her not to feed her kids, her family, red meat. And he's like, tell her she's lying. Tell her. And the guy's like, actually, I did say that. I told my patients that.
A lot of doctors say that.
Right. And he did this slow look and he's like, you, Holloway, you need to talk. And then he came back in a few minutes later and I'm trying to calm my heart down. And he finally comes back in and he's like, all right, I'm sorry. There was a misunderstanding. And he said, but how many stomachs do you have? And I'm like, 1. He goes, not 2, not 4. You're not a goat. You're not a cow. And I'm like, no. And he's like, you can't. And that's the first time I'd ever heard the concept of bioavailability. But at that time, I only heard of it in relation to iron. So I still didn't go, my brain didn't make that leap to all the nutrients in vegetables. It was you can't get to the iron. And I'm like, feed spinach. I work spinach into our food every day, every single day. And it didn't do any good. Everybody's anemic. So I was like, okay, so we put him on iron therapy plus add red meat. I never took red meat out of our diet again. But I was still, and I didn't put the kids on low fat. They got cheese, they got whole milk. I did the skim milk. I did all the low fat dressings and stuff. And, but I tried not to limit them, but it was the wrong oils. It was way wrong. I mean, like I said, Crisco, margarine, corn oil, canola oil, and I'd fry up ground beef, bought the leanest ground beef in the world, fry it up, and then go and wash it in the sink to get the saturated fat off of it. That's what I was taught to do. My son started, now his health crisis previous to that, he was a colicky baby. I was struggling after I had him. I got very sick. It was a rough birth. And my milk dried up. I couldn't breastfeed him.
I'm sorry, is that a colic? Is that a gut issue?
Colic where they're screaming and you don't know why. They just scream and scream and scream and scream. And, you know, you can blame it on gas, blame it on digestion, but nobody knows really why the baby's in such distress. Uh-huh. And so we got him, you know, they switched him to formula, which was a relief for me because I couldn't keep up with the breastfeeding at that time. And then he got really colicky and was spitting up and it was not going well. So they switched him to soy formula and thank God he reacted to that very badly. And so they switched him to this super expensive, it's basically like a pre-digested, it's based on goat's milk and everything's already broken down. So there's no enzymatic action that has to happen for the kid just to absorb the nutrients. He actually did okay on that, but he's still pretty fuzzy. So I think he wasn't even 3 months old because he was a 12 plus pound baby. So they're like, you know, he's just a really large kid and he needs more food. So they already had me adding the rice cereal and there's a wheat porridge from Gerber, putting that in his milk. And you just cut the hole in the nipple bigger and it's like a gruel. So that's what he was eating. And he was, I couldn't put my finger on it, but something wasn't going well with this boy. By 5 months, he was sitting up and doing finger foods, and this kid was eating like a horse. And he wasn't thriving though, and he just wasn't. I've been around enough kids, and I already had a kid, and I just could sense something was off. So he started getting really bad diarrhea. I'd say around 8 months, and he wasn't putting on weight the way he was. And I kept taking him to the doctor, and he was at the 99th percentile in height and weight from birth up until that point. And that was all, he's just stabilizing. And he dropped to the 75th, and he dropped to the 60th, and he dropped to the 40th. And I'm getting more and more alarmed because his color wasn't good to me. This is when he was little bitty. And I'm like, something's way off with this kid. And I just couldn't get any action. And finally, when he was crapping frank blood, pure mucus. He would eat. They had me feeding him because we were trying to keep calories on him because he had stopped growing. So I'm talking like a half a box of honeycomb cereal a day, 2 full peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, Lord, plus whatever we were eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This kid was a year old eating more than a grown man, and he wasn't growing. He's sleeping. He was eating or sleeping. That was it. That was his whole life. He stopped hitting developmental milestones. And I was getting so angry because now he's crapping like diaperfuls of blood and mucus. And like if you give him some canned peaches, 2 hours later, he's pooping out purely undigested canned peaches. Everything just went right through him. Whatever, if I gave him any kind of baby food, they're green, orange, yellow. A couple hours later, I'd get out green, orange, yellow, it perfectly color coded. And finally, he went off. He was below all the growth charts, height and weight and milestones. And finally, I got the referral to the pediatric gastroenterologist. And that was intense. He was hospitalized in the children's hospital with the critical care unit for quite a while. I don't remember. It's been a quarter of a century ago. And his diagnosis was malabsorption syndrome, and they didn't know why his guts weren't working. And this was back in '94. And the doctor told me, we got a bunch of tests back because they had released him from the hospital, sent him home, and they were going to go analyze everything and decide where we're going from here. At this point, everybody's really getting worried. That team the first team didn't give a crap because they're stupid. And the doctor called me up and he said, look, I'm in contact with about a dozen other doctors all over the planet who all have kids that are in your son's situation. And I'm telling you right now, we sometimes figure out what happened after the autopsy. He said, these little ones don't make it and we don't know why. And I was still giving him that formula. That was his milk, because it had tons of calories and everything. And I hoped he was getting something out of it. And so the plan was they were going to air evac us. So I had to go back, take him back in a week, get a pre-flight exam. They were going to air evac us to Walter Reed. And there he would be put on IV nutrition. And they would go nuts trying to save this kid's life. And after we hung up the phone and I'm sitting there trying to get a grip on all of this, and I just got mad. And I was like, not going to accept this. And I ran to the store and I bought Mama's homemade chicken soup ingredients for chicken and rice soup. And I bought whole good chicken. I bought rice. I bought some vegetables. I came home and I made him a really potent chicken stock. And that's all I fed him for a week. When we went back in a week later, I was just like hopping because you could already see the kid had life in his eyes. And he was eating about, maybe 20% of the caloric intake he was taking in before. Just taking him off all the junk they had. I mean, it was like a whole box of Pop-Tarts between the time we'd wake up and he'd lay down. Whole box. And he still was losing weight. And he had gained like a half a pound that week. And I'm sitting there like, told you. The doctor's like, all right, stop. What are you feeding this kid? Because this is the best he's ever looked. He's got some color in his face. And by that point, I was shaking it up between chicken and beef, but it was the same basic strong stock and lots of bones. And so I'm sitting there, give me a notepad, and I'm writing down the recipes. So he was cautious. He was like cautiously optimistic. He said, we're going to hold off on the life flight. I'm going to give you 2 weeks. If things don't keep going, well, you call me. Come back anytime. We'll abort this. But let's see how he does over the next 2 weeks, and we'll decide where to go from there. And 2 weeks later, he had picked up his linear growth. He had said his first few words, and he was no longer anemic. Oh, are you there? Yep.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So everything was going better. So the doctor was like, I'm calling all the other doctors and telling them about this because this doesn't happen. And so he's like, I think he's just got an immature gut and he needs time. So what I was told to do was keep him on this diet till he was 2 and then start phasing in regular foods gradually. And over the next year or 2, get him on a normal person's diet. So that's exactly what I did. And it was he was about 3 when we had the anemia crap happening. So much for listening to the doctors. The doctors were the ones, it was a dietitian that told me stuff him full of calories and sugar and fat and milkshakes and honeycomb cereals and all this crap. Let's get some weight on this kid. It was doctors that told me to put him on a regular diet. It was doctors that told me not to feed my kids red meat. So far, everything the doctors have told me to do has not been good, but I still believe,
So even though the little bit of beef and the little bit of chicken that you gave him worked, they still told you to give him other foods?
Yeah, I was to keep him doing that for until his 2nd birthday and then phase him on to a normal diet. We're going to give his gut a chance to mature, is what they told me.
Uh-huh.
So he stayed on this diet solid for a year, and it wasn't a little bit. The kid had a good appetite. He was eating beef, and after I'd boil up the chickens, I'd take the bones with the cartilage and knuckles on him after I'd stripped most of the meat off and hand it to him, and he'd chew the cartilage off the ends and suck out the marrow. And so he was getting that for a solid year, and I had a healthy kid. And then I did exactly what I was told, and I phased everything in very, very slowly. So slowly, we didn't see problems developing until it was too late. And that was some of the frustration. And then I was, the red meat thing, I have one doctor telling me not to, another one telling me I'm a bad parent for not feeding them red meat. I fed my kids red meat. And of course, because of the anemia scare, that sent us back to another nutritionist / dietitian, whatever she was, master's degree, ton of certificates. And she got me all squared away again on the proper diet for my kids, lots of whole wheat bread and all this crap. And I was still at that time transitioning him onto a normal diet, So fast forward to him being 6. I'm going to try to stick the story more around him, because if I try to confabulate it with myself, my daughter, and all the other crap that was going on, and it's going to get too confusing. So we'll just stick with the boy. So he was at 6, he started having behavioral problems, and he was a wild child. And the ADHD diagnosis came, and it bothered me because I couldn't tell what was part of being a normal boy and the school was really overreacting to weird things. So I didn't have faith in them because, if he was climbing the walls or doing something, throwing or acting out, I could see it, but they're getting after him they're singing, the teacher's reading them Old MacDonald Had a Farm, and my son is going, and an oink oink here, and principal's office, 2-week suspension, and I'm like, whoa. So I couldn't really tell. I knew he was a lot more active, hyper than my daughter was, but I couldn't judge. So, but by the time he was 7, clearly we had a problem now. By that point, I was homeschooling because I didn't know. I was just trying to get a handle on everything. And so I figured I'm going to keep him in a more natural environment for a while. And let's see if he just needs some time to mature. Boys sometimes mature slower than girls. So I thought maybe that was it. And no, by 7, he was starting to have real behavioral problems. He wasn't unhappy. He was just really getting flighty, and he wasn't focusing. And it was really, really bad. And he started complaining of headaches, and he couldn't see. And he would, complaining about his vision and headaches. And he would be sitting there, and he'd start rocking, and then he'd just start hitting himself. And I was, calm down, let's chill out and breathe for a little bit, take a break. We'll come back to this. And video popped out again.
Yeah, it just disappears sometimes. It's okay though.
Okay, so we're good.
Yeah, as long as you can see the little icon, I'm still here.
There's your icon. So by we had him at the doctor's, and they thought he might have accidentally given himself a concussion at some point and had a closed head injury. He had signs of inflammation in the brain, but they didn't know where or why. And that's why they thought it was like a post-concussion syndrome. And things were stabilized, though, after months and months of tests and going through everything. And the headache seemed to get better for a while. And then by 9, I had a job working with adults with severe mental problems, people with nonverbal autism, disabled at birth, mentality of a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old, kid, grown men that were still in diapers, that type of situation. And so through that job, I saw seizure disorder, and I saw autistic behavior, and I saw a bunch of other stuff that I did recognize. And my son was reacting to things like noises, like the vacuum cleaner, and he started doing behaviors like, eye rolling and flapping and stuff that I recognized very seriously. I knew what that was. But kids don't get autism at 9. I was born at night. I wasn't born last night. I knew that wasn't possible. And again, I'm taking her to the doctor, and she's ADD. And I'm like, I don't think so. This is not good. So one day there was a noise. I don't remember what it was. And my son went whooping, and he would do this weird smile where it didn't reach the eyes. I called it the mask, where it's like, and his eyes are rolling in his head and stuff. And I pulled him out from under the bed, and I was trying to calm him down and get him to focus. And his left eye did this Twitter thing, just the left eye. And I was like, that is seizure activity. I know what that is. And then the fight was on. He's going to a pediatric neurologist. So I went in, had a knockdown drag out with his pediatrician. Finally, I said, all right, how about this? Let's send him to a pediatric neurologist just to shut me up. He'll tell me it's nothing, and I will never bother you again. So she sent me. The good news is he had that eye twitch, the PD in front of the neurologist. The neurologist saw everything I did. And then he agreed with me, autism doesn't kick in this late. So he did a ton of tests, and it turned out what he found was that my son now had celiac disease and leaky gut syndrome.
From all the grain.
Right. Now, I had studied nutrition at this point for almost a decade. I was over a decade at this point. And I'd never heard of wheat. That was like telling me he was allergic to water. It was just no concept. And this was back, pre-internet, we didn't know jack. And so I put him on a gluten-free diet, again, keeping up the same nutritional standards that I had been taught, tons and tons and tons of plants, still juicing. Instead of the whole grains, it was rice mostly, but I would try to do brown rice, wild rice, keep that fiber up. Where kids' guts are being shredded, and I'm keeping that fiber up. God. So 2 weeks on a gluten-free diet, I had a new child. We sat down and watched a movie from beginning to end without disruption, just the kids and the parents sitting there happy, absorbed in this movie without him climbing the walls. It was remarkable. And everything was good. We thought we finally found answers. We were like, all right, we get our family back. And then he started losing weight fast and peeing all the time. And I'm like, wait, I know these symptoms too. This is diabetes. And sure enough, type 1 diabetic.
How old was he at the time?
He had just turned 10.
Wow.
So I'm like, here's the new saga. And we couldn't get a grip on his blood sugars at all. And at this point, I'm homeschooling because I tried to put him in school a few times. They couldn't cope with his medical needs, with his dietary restrictions. They just couldn't do it. And now I got to tell you, with diabetes education, my son was in the hospital for 5 days, and for 5 days, they sit you down and It's supposed to be intense education. It's brainwashing. You're aiming for 100 to 120 grams of carbs per meal with snacks.
That sounds like a lot.
Snacks, 45 to 60 grams. They shoot them up with these high doses of insulin, and then you have to chase the insulin with all these carbs. And the only way to do this, now that these kids have lost weight because they dump crazy, a type 1 diabetic, when they are first, the weight loss is insane. It just, because your body is just burned fat pure. And so they're trying to get weight back on the child. We're back to what was happening when he was a baby. And so they're pumping all the, since he's a celiac, we got to do milkshakes, junk food, candy bars, gluten-free candy bars.
So sugar.
Tons of sugar. Tons and tons of sugar.
A doctor told you this?
Yes, the pediatric endocrinologist, he needs carbs to grow. They have to have it. And the diabetic educator, she's a pediatric diabetic educator. She's got 6 years of degrees under her belt, plus specialty training. And this is what they're teaching you in the hospital. The food plates they were bringing him, my husband was doing this because he's a 200 plus pound guy, active athlete. And he's like, no. That's a lot of damn food, just ridiculous amounts of food. And of course, the kid's loving it. He's getting all sorts of goodies and French fries and ice cream and mashed potatoes. And so remarkably, when we got out of there, I had a little bit of sense by then, and this just didn't sit right with me. And his blood sugars were way out of control. That was the main thing where I was like, okay, this isn't working. This is not working. And so I got a little bit more sensible. I would give him, he had his basal, that's the background insulin. And then you bolus, you count up your carbs and then you bolus. Well, I wanted him to be able to eat a little bit more naturally. So we would give him half a bolus at the beginning. He could eat all he wanted for that meal, eat to satiety. And then we would count up and subtract what we already gave him and then finish the bolus afterwards. So he could get full and quit, eat, or distracted and not want to finish his plate. That was not going to be a problem. So, but that took months to figure that strategy out. Trying to manage a diabetic kid is really hard. At this point, the whole family's got immunity issues. Now my daughter's, I want to stick with my son, but I have to add, myself and my daughter are having repeated infections. By this time, my son starts having them too. And it's insane. Okay, so we get one kid going in with, what was it? Ringworm. While we're at the doctor getting the medication for the ringworm, other kid passes out. Check her out. She's crashing, coding. She's got German Lyme disease and it's gone into her brain. Get her into the hospital 2 weeks later, measles for fully vaccinated kids. Measles. This was like, what the hell is happening to my family? This was insane. And my son, though, my daughter got the bad ones, the Lyme disease, the measles, 4 times she's had measles now. My son had little one, a little annoying, but it was much, much more constant. One thing with diabetes is when a diabetic gets sick, their blood sugar shoots up, and it just happens. So his blood sugar kept going up and up and down and up and down and up and down, and then we get the infection show up a couple days later, and then you get the antibiotics, get it treated, and then everything normalizes, and then a month later he's back sick with something else. In the meantime, his digestive issues were getting worse. And we're switching doctors. I'm going back and forth. I'm taking in diet logs for everybody. We had a problem with thiamine, where the kids and I were all deficient in thiamine. And 6 months, this doctor fought with us. Again, back to the dietitian, back to the nutritionist, everything being examined. And what happened was I got so damn sick because, of course, every time things went wrong, I doubled down. More produce, more vegetables, I got to do more juicing. I got to get these nutrients into these kids. And I finally got so sick. Toward the end of the thiamine problem, we're taking, and the doctor's like, change brands. A month later, go back, blood draws, we're all still deficient. Change brands again, we're all still deficient. It got to the point where the doctor's like, this is crazy. I've never seen this. Well, at the end of the whole saga, I got so sick I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep going to the store. I'm trying to keep this all condensed as much as possible. But the thing is, it was more than just the produce. It was huge amounts of produce. But what happened with the thiamine thing is that I got so sick, my guts were so bloated, and I couldn't do it anymore. I was collapsing. So I just was like, hamburgers and French fries for everybody because mom is dead. And remarkably, 6 weeks later, everybody's thiamine levels came up. I just found out about thiamine disruptors a couple months ago, and all of that. You know how the plants where they have thiamine binders, they have thiamine destroyers. I was going through the list of plants that have some sort of thiamine disruptor in them of some sort, an anti-nutrient.
What are they?
Lord, I would have to look up the list. I've got too much information in my head, but it was everything.
But that's vitamin B1 for the record, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, everything I was dumping into those damn smoothies that I was pouring down everybody's throats in an interest in the trying to cure us. And when I finally got too sick to cook anymore, and we just did hamburgers and French fries, and nobody cared anymore. Oh, thiamine levels came up naturally.
Red meat.
Red meat and no more poison.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, my daughter, oh God, all those plants were super high in oxalates. And that's the other thing, the arthritis. We all had arthritis. Every sign of oxalate poisoning. My daughter, interstitial cystitis. Teenager getting kidney stones. Teenager.
And you think it was the oxalates?
I know it was.
Yeah.
I know it was. I got kidney stones, interstitial cystitis. My son was spared a lot because he hated my green smoothies. So every chance he got, he would dump them down the toilet. I'm just going to go drink this in my room and pour it out the window. So he was spared some of the hell I foisted upon them. Again, all of this under the careful supervision of an army of doctors, specialists, nutritionists, dietitians, cheering me on and sympathetically, you're doing everything right. This one dietitian, it was during the thiamine crisis, and I brought in the lab, all the records. She turns to me and she's pouring over everything. She turns to me and she takes my hands in hers and looks deeply into my eyes, and she goes, "Oh, Mama, nobody could do better than you're doing. I've never seen anybody work so hard. And yes, you're doing everything right. Sometimes these things just happen, and it's such a good thing you're doing this, because if you weren't feeding your family so well, oh my God, everything would be so much worse." So, you know, this is the thing that's getting me with this whole thing, why I want to speak out. I was never a vegan, but the mentality of, it couldn't be the diet, the science is sound. Now, vegans are kind of lucky in the sense that they're doing a more extreme diet. They're getting crap all the time for this diet. People are constantly telling them, and they're constantly having to push back against that. Now, imagine if really everybody was saying you're doing exactly the right thing. How long would it take you to figure it out? Even when I did ketogenic, in January of 2000, I was diagnosed with PCOS and type 2 diabetes, which with the numbers I had, with the way they've revised the numbers, actually would have been considered a diabetic by today's standards, high 120s, almost 130 fasting. They would have, and I was shocked because I eat practically no fat. 300 grams of carbs a day, but no fat. How could I be a diabetic? And I wasn't a fat person. How could I be a diabetic? I don't understand.
So wait. The belief is that fat causes diabetes?
Back then it was. Oh yes, back then. Saturated fat and fat caused diabetes.
I've heard some crazy vegans say that, but anytime they say stuff
No,
like
that's
that, I
the
just
old
assume it's
paradigm.
dead wrong.
No, that's the old paradigm. That is what we were taught in nutrition classes. That's what they taught you. Fat makes you fat. Oh, being fat gives you diabetes.
That's funny because in some languages, diabetes is basically sugar disease, and it's been that for decades. So like
well,
we've
the only
known this.
reason it's called sugar diabetes is because you're spilling sugar in your urine.
Yeah.
That's where sugar. It's not from eating sugar.
Well,
That's
I
what
mean,
we're.
right,
No. I'm saying that's what they taught us.
of course.
That's why it was called that. So the connection was fat was the cause of all evil, and it was saturated fat that was really the cause of all evil.
So let me get this straight. Fat is responsible for not only the fat in your blood, cholesterol or saturated fat, whatever, but also the sugar.
Yes.
That's just nonsense. But yeah, no, I mean, I believe you.
That was the science.
I didn't pay attention to like nutritional science back then, so it's just kind of shocking.
Yeah, and even my older relatives, the women, it was funny because these old women, they can't fool them. Bread makes you fat. Everybody knows that. Too much sugar makes you fat. And me, I got to tell you, one of the vegans that drives me the most crazy, I can't even look at her stuff anymore, is a natural vegan. And the reason that she upsets me so much, she was me 30 years ago. Totally confident, totally arrogant. I know. Let me educate you. So I've got these old women that don't have my problems, and I'm educating them on what they're doing wrong. That was what I was, the arrogant. You worship science as your God, and then when your God forsakes you, what do? So when I quit being so strict in January of 2000, when I was informed, no, the new studies are saying it's actually carbohydrates that make you fat, carbohydrates that cause PCOS and insulin resistance. And this one horse town country doctor is all excited, and I'm sitting there hearing things I've never heard in my life. Never. You do what? And he's like, he put me on, back then it was just called low carb. And later on it was tagged very low carb. And now it's called ketogenic, under 20 grams of carbs a day. Eat nothing but meat. But see, this is the other thing. The saturated fat will still kill you. Okay. The fat will still kill you. So here's what I was instructed to do. Dude, I did this for 15 years. Do 6 months of this diet, get healthy, cure yourself, and then go back to a normal, healthy diet, but keep the carbs more around 100, 120 grams a day, because you can't handle a normal, healthy 280, 300 grams that everybody's supposed to have.
Well, that doesn't make any sense. The diet that's healing you, when you're eating one way, let's say the standard American way, you're getting sick. And the diet that heals you is only really there to make you...
You have no bad idea how terrified people were of fat. Terrified.
I remember that. Everything was low fat and, like margarine instead of butter. I remember that whole craze, but yeah, it's just continue.
Right. And so, yeah, it was pretty, so I did 6 months of cycling. Now I had lost all the weight when I was a teenager, and I kept that weight off from 15 to 29, the PCOS. And that's one more thing, ladies with PCOS, they say obesity causes PCOS. That is not the truth. Tell them to go screw themselves. My first symptoms of PCOS I started having 9 months before any weight gain happened. I maintained my weight, healthy, fit, exercising, weightlifting, young mom, until I was 29, 14 years with no weight gain except childbirth. And then I gained exactly my 25 pounds, lost it immediately, bounced back. I did well. So PCOS happened long before I got fat. And then my metabolism changed and all the rules went out the window. And the calorie counting didn't work. And that was my moment of being disillusioned with my God, with my science, with all the truth that I thought I knew. But I was still scared of fat. So it was 6 months of keto, and lots of meat, and oh, I felt better. And then 6 months, and then I'd regain 25, 30 pounds. And then I'd do 6 months back, and I yo-yoed until it didn't work anymore. And you just
Because
start
that's what
gaining.
the doctor recommended?
Yes, that was exactly what I was supposed to do. That was my instructions. You can do this diet. I just had a doctor say this to me a year ago, because my last doctor, he was like, no. This is the first time I've ever had a doctor say, go keto, stay keto, when I got diagnosed with scleroderma. And he was like, whatever you do, it's a lower inflammatory diet. With your autoimmune disease, you have to stay keto. That's the first time I heard that. And I'd already pretty much figured, but keto really wasn't working even at that point because I was so sick. And having scleroderma, you're under a team of specialists, because every organ system's involved. And I've had 2 doctors. That's a fad diet. It's good for weight loss, but you can't do that for long, year max. That's in the last 12 months that I've been told that.
Yeah, doctors, they don't really know much about nutrition unless they really dedicate themselves to studying that
They don't know jack shit.
outside of academia. They don't, yeah. Not to say that anyone really knows everything there is to know, but doctors, no. They're pill pushers.
Yeah, and the thing is, they just don't know. They aren't taught. And then everything, but see, then I look at the nutritionists and the experts and the dietitians, and these people are being taught ancient information. I mean, we've known about PCOS being caused by insulin resistance and carbohydrates, and that the most effective diet for this, for sure, multiple studies were coming out in 97 and 98 saying that the low carb ketogenic diet was the way to go. It wasn't 100%, but it was the best we had. And I believe I want something like 60% remission rate. And here we are, more than 20 years later, and I in my keto forum, I'm looking around, and here are these young women coming in. I've got PCOS, and my doctor put me on birth control pills and metformin, and I've found some people are saying that this diet might help. And I'm like, the people who were born when this information came out have grown up, gone to high school or in college and preparing to go to medical school, and they're still not being taught the right information on this. Why is nobody knowing this? This should be common knowledge by now. They do not change. They don't do it.
You got to sell that grain. You know what I mean?
It's sad.
Yeah.
So with my son's illnesses, by the time he was a teenager, and that was the time we went through the thiamine hell. And then they found out he had selective IgA deficiency, where he just is missing part of his immune system. That actually helped a lot, because then we didn't have to wait when he got sick. We take him straight to the doctor and get treatment immediately. I finally had people on board, so his infections weren't allowed to rage. And but by 19, his kidneys were starting to fail. Starting to get first signs of peripheral neuropathy, and the pain was starting to get bad. He's very athletic, very cheerful, happy person, and he was starting to be laid low by all this, and his guts were ripped to shreds, and the gluten-free wasn't enough. And he was a young man who pretty much hit his wall, where he was sick and tired of the whole thing. So yeah, he did do pizza and all that crap, because what was the point? You know, all this other crap didn't work. And he didn't feel much better eating healthy or unhealthy. And at 21, he was informed that he was sterile and he would never be a father. He developed erectile dysfunction, and so that hit him hard. So he's like, I'm never going to have a family. I'm not going to have a normal, healthy relationship with a woman. I'm dying. And that same year, he got chronic pancreatitis. And he had 5 attacks. He had a full-on cardiac arrest, nearly died twice. One time, it was just respiratory arrest. The second time, it was a pure cardiac arrest. And that's 5 ICU visits. And he had enough, and he informed myself and my daughter that the pancreatitis attacks hurt. And he said, I know I'm dying, but I'm not going to just linger away. He said, I'm in for a very agonizing, painful, horrible death. And I'm going to do a slow decline, and it's not going to be pretty. And he said, so I want to go out on my terms. He said he was going to fun himself to death. He was going to ride every motorcycle, take every risk, climb every mountain, and he was going to have fun. And he did. And he had a lot of close calls, and every time he got away with it, he upped the ante. And it took a year for him to finally get his wish, and he got that. He got a very quick, extraordinarily quick death. And I mean, after they found his body and they came in, were telling us about it. And that moment was as bad as you would imagine. My daughter and I are sitting there, and it's like we saw it. We tried to tell him no. We tried to give him hope. We tried to support him in every way possible, but he had lost all hope, and he'd given up, and he was done, and he didn't want to hurt anymore. So we survived that, and I still didn't even know I had scleroderma at that point. I didn't know why I was so sick. I didn't know why I was dying. And I didn't care at that point. It took about, I think it was about a year after he died that I finally started. It was a year and a half after he died that I actually got help and got the answers that I was looking for. And this is the thing that kills me. I look at these scientists, and they put out things like, take out the saturated fat, substitute for linoleic acid, omega-6. That's your walnut oil, your corn oil, your canola oil, your flaxseed oil. And I still know people that take flaxseed oil for their heart health every fucking night. And then this is spread all over the news. It makes it into our national dietary recommendations, into the food pyramid, into what they feed our kids at lunch, into what they feed people in retirement homes, what they teach people to eat, critically ill people. And then they get the new data that says that actually raised the cause of all death, and that was a mistake. Oopsie. And here we are 6 years after they figured out that that was a horrible mistake, and they're still disputing and debating and talking about it in the shadows. And the public isn't aware. The consequences for not listening to your body and for believing in these people can be permanent and devastating and forever, and not fixable. Look at these vegans, and they're the ex-vegans, and they're talking about, oh my God, it took me so long to come back. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes you can't come back. You can't undo it. And I get so frustrated because I don't know. You're never going to stay up on all the latest data. You're never going to see all the stuff. And when something comes up, they got their established dogma, something comes up to challenge it. And boy, they resist and resist and resist. They don't move. And you won't even know the debate's happening unless you're really looking for it. So, you know, I've been humbled about as much as a human being can be humbled. The ultimate authority, I try to follow ancestral eating as best I can, but my ultimate authority is right here, this body. When this body says, nope, nope. If my body says I like that, I will do it. That's why I'm eating wild-caught salmon every single day. You know, this is telling me what to eat and what not to eat. And I don't listen to anything else. And when people tell me, oh, you're going to kill yourself. I had one guy, this was funny. It was another vegan coming after me on YouTube comment section. And I'm like, dude, and I was trying to explain to him how sick I was 7 months ago. I was dead. I was heading, colostomy bag was next operation, my 14th operation. And then after that, I didn't have much. I was done, you know. And he was finally conceded, and he said, I'm glad you're feeling better, but we'll see where you're at in 20 or 30 years. And I just bust out laughing at the computer. I'm like, and I'm typing back, 20 or 30 years? Dude, I didn't have two. Now, there's no way I'm going to die next year unless I get into a car accident. I am not critical anymore. You know, I got my skin back, my face, I can smile, I'm healing. I'm
And
still
this was
disabled.
keto, carnivore, or both?
Carnivore. Keto, I was still doing. Okay, I don't want to throw shade because I really like and admire and enjoy this man, Dr. Berg. But his 7 to 9 fucking cups of goddamn vegetables every day is exactly what I did.
Too much.
The toxins, the oxalates, the vitamin inhibitors, all that crap, you cannot process all that crap. And well, I've turned so many people around. I felt better too at first. I rode that train for, well, the way I did it was a teenager. It was mostly portion control and intermittent fasting and a lot of exercise. At 19 and 20 is when I really started studying nutrition. So I quit exercising so much, mainly because I had marriage, kids, and you don't have time to spend 3 hours a day at the gym. But so from 20 until 29, I maintained, and I felt great on this low-fat, high-carb diet with tons of plant material. And it worked fantastic until it didn't. And when it failed me bad. When I did keto, I did exactly Dr. Berg's formula. Every time I did that 6-month cycling, I was doing 79 cups of veggies, lots of meat, of course, throw in the omega-6 freaking fucking oils, because that was, again, what was the good for you oil back then. People have to realize humanity right now is at a point in our development where we have just enough knowledge to be really, really dangerous. We are just smart enough to cause a lot of harm. And you need to be cautious and realize this science is changing all the goddamn time, all the time. And you don't know about it because they will scream the lie and whisper the revision.
Well, a lot of it is in science. That's why there are so many problems and so many contradictory findings, is because there are a lot of biases and very few actual scientific experiments. So, you know, a lot of what people call science isn't science at all.
You're making an excellent point. Science is being conducted by, what are they called? Flawed creatures, human beings. That's the freaking problem. Human beings that are doing publish or perish, human beings that are biased when they look at the data, and they are not, there are good people doing good things, and they're usually shouted down. They aren't supported. So yeah, I'm gonna say, I followed the best science of the day. I promise you, you're feeding your kids things now, and in 20 years, somebody's gonna have something horrible, and science is gonna step up and say, oopsie, we did it again. You needed this. And you're gonna look at your child who is dead or dying, and realize you poisoned your kid all the way to this point. They didn't stand a chance by being your smart kid. My kids would have been better off being, if I'd been an ignorant farm wife like my mother was. Just eggs, meat, homemade bread, vegetables in season, some berries in season, and that's all you got. And my kids would have been better off. I was, until my mom got okay. So my beginnings, it was the farm, and my dad was, for a while we lived in the Alaskan bush. My dad was a trapper, so it was a lot of moose, game meat, and on the farm it was eggs, goat, some beef, and I was doing well. And then my parents split up. My mom decided to become a modern woman and join the modern world, and that's when it was the Pringles and macaroni and cheese and all that crap. And that's when I developed anxiety disorders and all sorts of mood problems, which miraculously, I don't have these problems anymore eating carnivore. Shocker. I was told that was just how you were made.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of people can handle the standard American diet to a point, and that point is different depending on the individual and a lot of other factors, I'm sure, and no one really knows.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
A point of clarification. What I was eating was the best nutritional practices. I always thought of standard American diet things more like the pizza, McDonald's, crap like that. And then the best nutritional practice, the food pyramid and all that stuff was not standard American diet.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Okay.
true. But it's a little bit better, I guess you could say, or not as bad right now. But you know, a lot of bread. There's a lot of overlap also. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, the food pyramid won't tell you to drink Coca-Cola and eat Twinkies.
Yeah, and if you're
like
eating the pizza and crap, you're not also cramming in 7 to 9 cups of produce a day.
Right, right.
So, I did it right. I did the American diet right.
But in many ways, the standard American diet is also better because, at the very least, you're getting a lot of meat. That's one of the criteria, I believe, is a diet heavy in meat. Now,
Yes.
but
Go ahead.
obviously, there's a lot of processed meat, which is also a problem. So none of these recommendations basically work, and it really just comes down to what you were talking about, is that you essentially have to figure this out for yourself. And it's something that we already had figured out. It's all these suggestions and recommendations that have actually put us on the wrong path and made us stray away from what was already working. I mean, every single species on this planet has been able to figure out what to eat, and we're no different. It's really all these external factors and all these so-called authorities telling us what we should be eating that's messing us up. So,
yep.
If people are to find their way back, they have to do that on their own. And that's, I guess, with all these different dietary movements, that's kind of what's happening. It's just the problem with all that is that so many people are so dogmatic and they think that one size fits all, whereas that couldn't be further from the truth.
Hubris. And that's the biggest thing. Like with the, I do not think I would be in a position where I had to eat pure carnivore for the rest of my life. And I think I am in that position. I don't think that I'm ever going to heal. I do not. My immune system's been inflamed. My immune system's been triggered by so many things at this point. I think that if I had eaten the way I did when I was small, when we were doing the hunter-trapper lifestyle and the farm lifestyle, I think I would have been fine. I would have been able to have my apple pie at Thanksgiving. I would have been able to have fruits and vegetables in season, in moderation. Do my meat fast, where that's all you have access to is meat and a little bit of grain. Because the winter season, nothing grows. If it truly was local and eggs in the spring, I think I would have been fine. I would not be in this position where this is. That's why, people are like, so do you think everybody should be eating carnivore now? And I'm like, no. But if you have metabolic problems, immune problems, digestive problems, mental health problems, I think it's worth a shot.
Yeah, it's the ultimate elimination diet. And, if everybody grew up eating animal products, good quantity of animal products, yeah, we could eat some veggies and, even some grain. We could eat everything, but you need to have that base, I believe. You know what
I
I mean?
agree.
And if you don't have that base, it's likely that you will get metabolically deranged and all screwed up. Like, there's nothing wrong with eating carbs. However, if you eat a high carb diet for 20, 30, 40 years, carbs
You
become
break
a
it.
problem. Yeah. And
You break it.
it could be that eating meat for that long could become a problem. But if you're at a
Right.
point where you don't really have a choice and it feels great to eat nothing but animal products, well, then you're just kind of out of luck. Out of luck. This is just what you got to
Yeah.
do, and people have to,
And
accept it.
like I said, I did well on this high carb, low fat diet for a decade. I thrived on this diet. I was fit, I was strong, and I was fine. And then it broke. It can only take so much, and I getting it through people's heads, you know, this will look great short term, but it's not going to get you to old age. It's not going to get you to old age. And like you said, meat may not get me to old age, but at the same time, right now, I can promise you I'm living longer on all meat than I would have on keto with tons of produce, or the alternative, a nutritionally complete diet.
Right. So it might not be the best solution for everybody, but it is the best solution for you right now.
My whole thing is I want people to listen to their bodies. Even then, that can be deceptive. Like I said, I thrived for 10 years on that crap diet that killed us.
Well,
So
I mean, but if you look at ancestral foods, which is kind of what you're doing, what a lot of people talk about and strive to do when it comes to their diet, all these new foods, if we have all these new modern diseases, obviously, if we are going to target diet, well, what's the culprit? All the new foods that, correlate with all these new diseases. So, that's a good starting off point with
I agree. I think
all
that's
these
totally
man-made
legitimate.
foods. Yeah, and that also goes for vegetables and fruits. You got to be careful with that stuff because a lot of it is man-made, and
Yeah.
just because they were neutered, if you will, or like wild carrot, for example, is just completely toxic and you shouldn't eat it.
Right.
But just because they were detoxified to a certain degree with selective breeding and hybridization, that still doesn't make it a perfect food. You know what I mean? It's still something that if you don't have that animal food base, could mess you up in the long run because you don't have the vitamins and the nutrients and everything to keep your body strong and able to detoxify itself. A lot of people are talking about going on a certain diet to detoxify, and that makes sense, I'm sure, in certain different contexts. But if you just keep a strong body and you build your body up and you have a healthy liver, you're just going to be able to detox. I'm not saying that people shouldn't eat stuff that's bad in huge quantity, you know what I mean? But if you have enough of the good stuff, all the bad stuff is going to get detoxed naturally by your liver.
Well, I think that one of the things that people cannot comprehend until you really commit to, I'm only going to eat local. I really love it when people do that because reality sets in fast, especially in the northern climates. And when we were living in Alaska, okay, what are you going to be eating if you're only eating local? You're eating a lot of moose. You're eating a lot of fish. You're eating a lot of wild birds.
Sounds
You're
good to me.
animals are trapped. Yeah. But as far as produce goes, I got to tell you this real quick because it's a funny story. So my mom was desperate to make a silk purse out of sow's ear, and she wanted to find stuff we could forage and stuff like that. And she found, we stumbled onto this berry patch. I don't remember what kind of berry it was, some delicious wild berry. And she was so excited. And so it was like, all right. And we watched this thing for months, like once a week go down and check. And sure enough, we get the little green berries, it's coming. And then we get that, going down more often to check, and they're getting bigger. And then the first berry starts getting a little bit of color on it. And my mom's like, ooh, they're starting to ripen. We're going to get the berries. And this is a big patch. So we waited 2 days, went down there. Every single one of those first berries that was ripening the birds were just swarming this bush, and they have better eyes than you, and they're a little more nimble than you are, and they get them right before you do. So the bush did its thing, and it has to outbreed the predators. So about a week later, it finally did its big push. You know, where finally there's going to be enough, too many for all the birds to eat. So my mom and I go down there, and we got the old metal coffee cans, Hills Brothers. And we get down there, and we start picking, and I'm not very good at it because I suck at these things. I'm not very nimble. And but my mom's like, we're getting some off this bush. And all of a sudden we start hearing this noise, and I swear to God, it sounded like a pig on the other side of this bush. And my mom kind of is like, what is that? And she looks through, and she pulls back like this, and she's like, keep your head down and don't change anything. Just keep picking. And this freaking huge ass bear stands up on the other side of this bush. And this thing was huge. And it looks down at us. And my mom's like, don't make eye contact. Don't look at it. Just keep picking. And we just acted like nothing was going on. Thank God the bear was more interested in those berries than he was in us. And my mom, it was funny because I was on her right, and she's just kind of easing me down, picking our way down. And we get down to the end, and we finally start crawling out of the ravine and turn around and look. And there's this big ass bear helping itself. We got about 1.5 cups of berries off that whole patch. The bear didn't leave until the whole thing was stripped. He was there for hanging out, guarding this for like a solid week plus. And so the bear won. And it's like, all right, so you're going to tell me you're going to live off the land and you're going to forage. And I see this one. I have a friend who's really into herbalism, and I just roll my eyes because I'm like, anything worth eating, you're not getting to first, honey. If you're really going to forage out with nature, you got tons of competition you're not even aware of. And so, we got back to the freaking motorcycle, or not the motorcycle, the snowmobile. And we had the tracks on it, and we got back out of there. And it was like, well, it's not chasing us. It's it. Got back home, and we got our 1.5 cups of berries. That was it. And I'm like, so there's your foraging. There's where you're going to go to your nature. There's where you're going to get your food. It's out there. You just have to know what to look for and fight off the bears and beat the birds. Okay. That's what happened.
Kill the bear and eat the bear.
Yeah. I don't know why they didn't kill the bear. That would have been something they normally would have done. I don't remember. Of course, my mom might not have told them about it to spare the bear. If they came into camp, they were killed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But,
so, I was just going to ask you, how long have you been eating carnivore? You said 8 months?
7 months.
7 months. And what changes have you noticed? I don't think you covered that. You just said you felt you feel best. Your best. Okay.
So first of all, the chronic fatigue syndrome and the brain fog, those symptoms have lifted. The IBS has improved. And you got to understand, all these diagnoses do roll in together, all under scleroderma. It starts with, like in my case, it started with IBS, and then it moved on to, the vascular problems started. And so you're getting diagnosed with a bunch of different things, and then finally they figure out it's scleroderma, and then it's like, oh, your whole body is eating itself. Your muscles, your body's attacking its actual muscle tissue. And so like when I had my gallbladder out, they didn't know why it wasn't working. And it wasn't until they got to pathology and they realized the whole wall, the muscle wall, was just loaded with white blood cells and histamines. My body was attacking the gallbladder as if it's a foreign thing. And they still hadn't figured out scleroderma by that point. But every muscle in my body is under attack. My lungs so far have been spared. And yeah, I got to quit smoking. I'll get to it. Mucous membranes, just piece by piece. So one thing, first is the anxiety that I've lived with since I was a little kid. That just stopped. I stopped having panic attacks. It just stopped. But it was after 12 weeks. And all of a sudden, I just found myself happy. for no reason. And that's never happened to me. I've always been a very glum person and very determined and very serious. And no, I was optimistic and happy, and it just came out of nowhere for no reason. And it finally dawned on me, I'm meeting myself without mental illness for the first time, without this cloud hanging over me, because the brain gets inflamed too. The brain fog was lifting about that same time, clarity of thought coming much, much better. My skin, this last month, the last of the tough skin, if you Google pictures of people with scleroderma, I was well on my way. You know, the hands doing this, you can't straighten your fingers completely because the skin is constricting. I still have one rough patch here, but I don't think that's scleroderma. I think it's just because I abused this hand because, you know, dishes and all that stuff. The IBS has improved tremendously, and that was a serious problem for me. Having my skin, I can open my mouth all the way now. I can smile and it reaches my eyes. The skin is soft and supple. It's not as tough. It's not constricting as much. The itching, because as your skin pulls in, it tightens and it feels like it's being split up in half. And that stopped. I don't itch anymore. I don't have the scleroderma rash anymore. It basically is outbreaks. It's like shingles. It really is. It blisters everywhere. Both legs would they start itching and burning. It felt like I got into a nettle patch. And then the blisters would pop up, and then it would just went to hell from there. And that was horrible. Hydrocortisone cream does not touch that. Let's see what else. The vascular disease. My blood pressure started to come down. My peripheral neuropathy has improved tremendously. I am the stomach problems. My esophagus, between the GERD, the chronic fungus in my thrush in my throat, and the scleroderma, which is for some reason with scleroderma, the body goes after the esophagus itself, and so your throat will swell up, and it feels like you're getting allergic reaction to something. And I haven't had one of those attacks in forever. I have to get a scoping annually because I have scarring all in there, and they're like beautiful. I've got scarring, and it's really serious scarring. That's why I have to keep getting it scoped. The doctor's afraid it's going to split one day. My esophagus is just going to rupture, so I have to keep an eye on that. Hard coughs and stuff can do that, but it doesn't hurt. It's not swelling, and I can swallow like a normal person. I can swallow pills. I just choked down a whole piece of liver yesterday for the first time in my life. I hate liver, and I did it. And I was able to swallow every bite. I don't choke on food. I don't, it's just so much better. My vision has improved. I actually had to go back to the ophthalmologist 2 months ago. My glasses weren't working, and when they don't work, you go back, get a new set of glasses because that means things are degrading. And the scleroderma does affect my eyes badly. And I'm no longer farsighted. I don't need bifocals anymore. My prescription has improved, and he's like, this is really impressive. So I can see. That's kind of nice. Now the muscle ache, that was something that I had not been able to get touch. That settled in like 15 years ago, and you ever get a high fever, get the flu, and every muscle in your body just aches horribly? I felt like that for 15 years, and nothing touches it. It's not fibromyalgia. That was the first diagnosis. It was the wrong diagnosis. It's my immune system killing off my muscles, and my muscles inflaming and screaming. And
so just a bunch of autoimmune issues, sounds like.
That's what scleroderma is. It's up there with lupus.
Huh.
When it's your whole system. And but I started working with Elliot Overton. I actually saw him being interviewed by Bart Kay, and I'm pretty shameless at this point. If I think somebody can help me, I'll reach out and inform them they're going to help me. And so I've been working with him for the last few weeks, and he's got me doing red light therapy. Too soon to tell, but the sunshine, he's helped me straighten my sleep out with blue light blocking glasses. That made a difference night one. So the insomnia got under control. And with the insomnia and the sun, plus the salmon, those three things, muscle aches, I'm getting breaks now. I haven't had a break from this pain in 15 years. And I got 28 straight hours without that pain. And then it came back, which I was fine with because, you know, it comes and goes. But then the next day I got another 4-hour break, which I didn't expect. I thought I'd have to wait a while before maybe I get some more benefits. No, I'm getting benefits. So every single system in my body has been affected by this disease, and every single system. My lungs are no longer inflamed. I no longer have chronic bronchitis.
Even though you smoke.
Even though I smoke, and I actually am smoking more lately. And I've got, what was the other? My blood ox is up. It was down into the 80s all the time. And now it's gone up to 98, 99, normal, healthy person. The scleroderma was just starting to get there. And that's the killer. That's when you've got 1.5 years, 2 years, you're done. And I was right there. And last tests look good. So I'm getting reversing of scar tissue. That's the other crazy thing that's not supposed to happen. The keloid scars are going down that come with scleroderma. It's part of the skin because your body's building up bad collagen. And so you end up with keloid scars and all that stuff, and they're going down. And pigment, and this isn't a life-changing thing or anything, but I've got horrible brown pigment around my eyes. I mean, like it looks like a raccoon mask. And that's almost with my skin now. I don't have that pigment as bad. It was really, really bad. And
are you, sorry to interrupt, are you talking to your doctor or doctors and telling them about your dietary change and how that's influenced everything?
I'm shameless. I'll tell everybody, yes.
And what do they say to that? Are they in disbelief or?
One doctor is doing these fad diets. They look good short term, you know, but you know, you're not going to be able to stay on this. It's not healthy. It's not good for you. That's Dr. One. And he was really mad that I quit eating fiber, which makes me furious because that's actually the new recommendation for scleroderma, and he's not listening. My rheumatologist, he is, this last visit especially, he just keeps looking at me and he's just shaking his head, remarkable, remarkable. And he said, this doesn't happen. People don't get better from scleroderma, not like this. And he's like, all right, here's the deal. I want you to keep doing what you're doing, and then we'll see. And so next time I go back, I got to ask my husband, I forget what my next appointment is. We'll do more tests, and I think he's going to be pretty impressed because I've improved even from when I've seen him. And when he sees the skin changes, that is going to blow his mind because that doesn't happen ever. My ophthalmologist is really pleased, and he's like, and I'm like, oh, egg yolks, a lot of them, I eat them.
So, and finally, because I got to get going over here, but
okay.
So what are you eating exactly? And you know, if you're talking about meat, do you care if it's like grass-fed or grain finished? Is it
okay, so
caught?
I have wild caught salmon every single day, a piece of wild caught salmon.
Wow.
I have what? Oh, so anyway,
no, it sounds expensive. That's all.
No, just buy a bag of it. It's already. I just pull one out and cook it up. I will do it. You don't know how much money I was spending on supplements and medications. I mean, $20 copay for 5 medications that I don't have to take anymore just for my stomach and esophageal problems. So that's $100 saved. I can afford the salmon.
Yeah, and it tastes great.
Great. The egg yolks that about 6 to 10 egg yolks a day, raw. And then for the meat, I am just starting to get into the grass-fed stuff. That is the problem. It is expensive. And I'm like, well, I've been healing on regular meat. As soon as we're done here, my husband and I are making a Costco run. So I've bought some grass-fed stuff. I know the science says it's better for me. Honestly, as long as I'm still healing on what I'm doing. Now the liver, the salmon, those I am very strict about. The liver is the grass-fed calf's liver. That's a high quality thing. But the rest of it, but I'm pretty full with the salmon, the egg yolk, liver.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing a ton of the other stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Are you using any extra fats like butter or any dairy in general?
No dairy. I took dairy out. That was better. And then I added butter back in. And butter, there's something about butter I do not understand. My body likes it. But for this 30 days that I'm working with Elliot, he's like, let's go 30 days. And so I'm like, all right, 30 days, no butter. I don't have a problem with that.
It could be the butyrate, which is like a side effect, if you will, a byproduct of fiber fermentation. So if you're taking out the fiber, it probably makes sense to eat some butter.
Right. And I do feel better on eating better than without it, but without dairy in general. And then lard is my primary cooking fat right now. I was doing duck fat in the beginning, but it's high in omega-6, so I had to cut that out. Anything that's inflammatory, I try to avoid. And I do use some herbs and spices, and I do drink coffee. And I do Celtic sea salt and potassium and D-ribose 3 times a day. And that's my formula, basically. And I'm getting better. And as long as I'm continuing to improve, I'll stay here. Elliot wants me to reevaluate in 30 days, and he really was like, let's take out the egg whites, and he was right on that. I can't handle the whites, and so I actually did a bit of an experiment where I had a little egg white omelet and nearly died. So we aren't doing egg whites anymore. Even when I do.
You have an allergy of some kind or something?
Oh yeah, apparently I have a bad allergy, and in smaller doses, like 2 eggs worth of whites, I can get away with that, I think. And then, but I get sporadic IBS symptoms. So then it's like, well, maybe I'm not getting away with it as well as I think. So when I had that 5 egg white omelet, it's a problem. And I don't want to do anything that's going to go too crazy. You know, if it's going to stimulate the immune system and irritate my gut, I can't do it at all.
And one last thing, like, do you eat 2-3 times a day, OMAD, intermittent fasting, any of that stuff?
I eat when I'm hungry. I don't eat when I'm full. I stop eating when I am full.
Intuitive eating, basically.
If I don't eat for 2 days because I'm content and I'm not hungry for 2 days, if I'm starving and I want to eat the whole house for 5 times a day for 3 days in a row, I have absolutely no problem. Whatever my body asks for, my body gets. What I have found is that when the fasts happen, I lose my appetite out of nowhere. Typically, there's an inflammatory process happening at the same time. And I think that the energy it takes to digest a meal, the body doesn't want to spend that on that at that moment. Like when you refeed. I've got something else I'm doing. I need a break from digestion to focus on this other problem. And then when it does its thing, then I feel better and the appetite comes back. And then sometimes I dive right back in and I'm starving. Other times I'm not. I just go back to normal 1, 2, 3 times a day. It just is intuitive eating 100%.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well,
this is the authority. This gap.
Well, like I said, I got some stuff to do, and it looks like there's a big storm coming anyway. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story. And, you know, it was a little sad, but, you know, it looks like you've figured things out, at least for the time being. And, you know, you're just another success story, I guess you could say, carnivore diet success story, which isn't to say that this is the right thing for everybody, but it's definitely, it seems like it is a really good dietary intervention when maybe perhaps, you know, you're desperate and you just need something and you don't know what that is.
And I have to make one point before we sign off.
Yeah.
Please stay humble, people. And if your body is saying something is not working, you don't have to justify it. You don't have, if there are 7.5 billion people on this planet, if you're the only one that reacts poorly to something, that's okay. You don't have to eat it. If things aren't going well, please redress it. And if science isn't backing you up and what your intuition and what your body is saying, please, please, please just do your best to stay with what your ancestors did, be smart about it, but you don't have to get validation from science to do what is working right, what is the best for you. Does that make sense? That's why I would never tell anybody, carnivore is the only way to eat, my way is the highway, and everybody should do this, and this will cure. That is something else I wish I'd like to give out to all YouTubers who are trying and getting some success with carnivore, like I am. You don't have the answer for everybody. You don't have the cure for every disease. All you can do is share your story, and maybe somebody can get something out of it. Stop acting like you found the Holy Grail, because it's dangerous too. It might not be the best thing for somebody else.
That makes perfect sense to me. I do it because it works for me, but the minute it stops working for me, I'm going to look for something else. You know what I mean?
And that's exactly where I'm at. If this isn't working, but see, like I just took out the egg whites completely. So here I am 7 months in, and I'm changing things up. I'm not locked into a dogmatic position based on morality, based on anything. I'm just trying to take care of this flesh. That's it. So stay grounded, people. And when it comes to your kids, just try your best, but you can't trust everything that the experts and the studies and stuff are saying. They will lead you to, you got to go back to what your grandmother did and your great grandma did. More than that, they knew better. They had better than an 8-year degree. They had 10,000 years of experience.
They ate what they ate. They didn't listen to any of these corporations. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
And I see people poo-pooing bone broth. I feel better. My digestion improves. I am healthier when I drink bone broth. You say there's no scientific basis for that, and there's no reason for that, and that it shouldn't work. I don't care. I don't care. It works. I'm going to keep drinking.
Most people have no idea what science is. Most people do not read any studies. They've never conducted any studies. They have a belief, and they look for, some literature out there or somebody's opinion that backs them up. That's all that it comes down to. And even if there are studies,
you have to force. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, even if there are studies, just because the researchers in the study have come to a certain conclusion based on the research, that doesn't mean that they didn't make a mistake.
Right. And if you have to force it, like juice all your vegetables because you can never possibly eat that much, or eat until you're past the point of full or whatever, it's not right. It's not right to have to force your body to do anything. It should be food should not hurt. Food should not hurt. Food should not be stressful.
Totally.
It's just easy. Oh, and final thing. I know you got to go. Part of the fixing the GERD thing was your video. This is another reason I wanted to thank you. Where you're explaining about the pancreas being stimulated by stomach acid dropping, that was like the clue, the trigger. And I had been for 30 years doing the drink a big glass of water before every meal. And so here I am suffering from this horrible GERD and, duodenal ulcers and all this stuff. And I stepped back and I said, instead of thinking I've got too much stomach acid, what if I think of this as a malfunctioning organ? What would this organ look like if it were functioning properly? And then at that point, I was like, well, it would have a pH of 1.5 to 2. Maybe taking all these antacids and acid reducers and drinking all this liquid is making my problem worse. 15 years of GERD cured in 24 hours by letting my stomach be a stomach. That's all I had to do. And don't forget, with both my kids, chronic pancreatitis my daughter has it too. That's what's killing her now. So, this means something to me. So as soon as you said that, I was like, holy crap. So now I eat at the table like a human being, and I let my stomach, and my stomach knows what to do.
Drink water when you're thirsty and when you're not eating, right? And this
Right.
whole idea of 8 glasses a day, I mean, maybe that's right for some people, but that might be too much for a lot of people also. So
I don't think it's right. I really
yeah.
don't. I don't think it's necessary. But you know who it works for? People who are doing tons of oxalates and are struggling to keep their kidneys flushed. They
Uh,
need a glass of water, or else they're going to build up stones like that.
well, and if you exercise a lot, also if you live in a drier climate, obviously that's going to dry you out too. So
But you also need their salts.
yeah.
You know, I
Well,
live in the desert. I live in the desert, and if you just drink water with the
it
heat and the
doesn't work.
dry air, you're going to make yourself sick.
You just want to drink more water. Yeah. It
Right.
doesn't
So
work.
that even then, it's not just dump again a gallon of water. All right, dear. I am going to let you go. And thank you for hearing my story. And I hope it, like I said, if one person gets something out of this, I really, really hope. There is a lot more to this and a lot more to my son's stuff, but it's already gone on for too long. So
Well, I'm
I'm
sure
glad.
some people will, and it's, a
Another reason I'm
cautionary tale, if nothing else.
well, the other reason I'm really grateful you're letting me speak is because losing your son at 22, you do not want that death to be in vain, you know. And he, you know, our family lost a lot. We lost
Yeah.
everything. And, you know, my boy lost his life all under the care, direct guidance of the most educated people. And they, you know, I would like that to mean something, you know.
Makes perfect sense.
All right, dear.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, and have a good day.
Thank you for hearing me. Bye-bye.